Good afternoon, everybody, and you're very welcome to our webinar this afternoon. Today, we're going to be taking a look at a business health check and helping you to navigate your restructuring options. We have fantastic speakers lined up this afternoon. And before I introduce those, I suppose it's worth noting that these are obviously positive times for Waterford. Last week, I saw the big one, I suppose is what you call it. So it is a good time to do a health check on your business. There are opportunities coming down the line. We need to be prepared for them. And I suppose that's not taken from the tough times that we are in the middle of and have gone through over the past number of months. As always, we're here to support you with our webinars, and we're obviously at the end of emails and the phone if we can be of support in any way. I suppose I'm not going to stay on too long because we have three speakers that are going to follow and look at various aspects of today's topic. So I'm delighted that we are joined by Derek from Almega. We have Andrew from Deloitte, and we have Valerie from Nolan, Farrell and Goff. And I suppose without further ado, I'll hand you over to Derek, who will maybe just give us an idea as to what everybody's going to be speaking of and what the agenda for today's webinar is. Derek, over to you.
Super. Thanks, Linda. Good afternoon, everybody. Just in terms of the overall webinar, we're just going to do, as we said, it's the business health check. So at this point in probably navigating your business through the pandemic, you might be facing some financial difficulty or some financial questions. So the purpose of today is to give you some tips to help you navigate that and to understand some restructuring options which may help make your business viable going forward. So I'm going to really focus on cash flow management and go through the supports that are available. Andy is going to look at tips in terms of engaging with stakeholders if you are experiencing some financial pressure, and how to access the restructuring options that are available to your business. And Valerie is going to take an overall view of the legal considerations you should take into account when you're dealing with these issues. So I'm going to kick off with my presentation, and just to run through the next slide, Linda, and go through the contents. Firstly, I think it's very important that you understand where your business is. So we'll talk about the importance of management accounts. I'd also encourage businesses to take a medium and long-term view, try and look past the pandemic, and give some tips on that. We look at the cash flow and cash flow management in terms of inflows and outflows. I'll give a summary on supports that are available and focus on the ones that make an impact to your cash flow, and then recap on the steps that you should take. So firstly, just moving on and looking at understanding where your business is now. It's very important that you take time to understand where your business is now and try and complete a set of accounts from either March to October or for the full year, because this will understand your trading, if your costs have increased, if new costs have come into play for your business, such as PPE, signage, or staff costs. We'll also give you visibility on your monthly turnover. So is it stable or is it fluctuating? And it will allow you to decide whether your current plan is working or not. So then if we move on to the next slide, you know, it's very important that you look at your quarter by quarter outlooks. So prepare an outlook for quarter 4 based on your quarter 2 and quarter 3 results. A lot of businesses are struggling with preparing to projections for 2021 because they don't know what restrictions they'll be operating into, what their trading environment will look like. My advice would be, it's very important to set a base, make assumptions, set projections for 2021. This will allow you make decisions going forward in 2021. Will also give you a sense of whether you have sufficient cash flow to get through it, how your business will manage. Most businesses at this stage probably have key performance indicators. It's very important that you review them on a monthly basis. Some very helpful ones will be like sales growth percentage, or maybe in this environment, it's sales decline percentage, give an understanding of where the sales in your business is going. Compare your gross margin and your net margin versus 2019 to see what pressure your profit margins are coming under, particularly in 2020. Also, if you look at your cash flow in terms of EBITDA, give you a sense of what cash is available for the business. Some key KPIs for overheads will be your wages as a percentage of turnover, or your other overheads as a percentage of turnover. When you've done all that and moving on, it's very important to take a medium and long-term view. I would be encouraging businesses to look past the current pandemic. A lot of businesses may be in survival mode or crisis mode, but I think the businesses that are able to look forward, look at their 5-year strategy and still see if they can hit that will probably thrive and survive better than if they're just currently in crisis mode. Even if you look at our own government, they've now moved to a medium-term plan in the way they're dealing with the crisis, and it's probably time for your business to do the same. And key elements of a medium-term view would be to review your business model, to review your cost base, and also to build in an ability to react to changes in restriction levels. So if your business was caught by surprise because of level 5 restrictions, you should look at that and make sure the next time the restrictions level change, that you can just seamlessly flow and change your business model to meet that. As Adam Lake, an author on time management, said, planning is bringing the future into the present so that you can do something about it now. And I think that quote, now more than ever, is very relevant. We're going to move on now and look at cash flow management. Firstly, I want to focus on inflows. So again, I'll be saying to businesses, important to understand what drove your revenue over the last 6 months and where your inflows are coming from, and if it has changed to what your normal business model is. So in terms of, is your business generating offline sales, online sales? Is your revenue coming from existing customers? Or say, for example, you recently began trading online, are you driving sales from new customers? Do you understand the impact the government supports is having on your cash flow? What will happen to your cash flow when these supports timelines change and they expire? How will your cash flow manage like that? Are you eligible for the new supports coming in, and have you got them into your cash flow, such as the COVID restriction support scheme? But most importantly, in terms of inflows, are you managing your debtors and collecting your receivables on time? It's tough times for all businesses, and I think there needs to be a real focus on making sure that your cash is coming in. If we look then at the next slide in terms of the inflows, I have an example there of a business that has looked at its inflows over the last 4 months. So we can see there for this business, June was particularly strong, but when you strip out the government supports, there were nearly 6,000 of its 16,000 of inflows. The Restart grant was one-off. It's not available for that business going forward. Also, if you look at the sales, this business has recently started doing online sales and has seen significant growth there, but it would appear to have a problem with its existing customers in that sales are falling off. So now this business, now that it realizes that, will be able to maybe take steps to get those sales from existing customers back up. The next element of cash flow management is managing your outflows. So moving on to the next slide, we'll just go through some tips on how to manage your outflows. Key part of COVID-19 is legacy debtors. So a lot of businesses may have legacy debts that they haven't paid since March 2020 in relation to trade creditors or warehousing revenue debt, non-payment of rates. Your business may have got a temporary increase in an overdraft, which it cannot repay currently. So all of these legacy creditors are going to be built up and have to be repaid at some point in time, probably in 2021. So you need to understand what level of legacy creditors your business has built up in 2020 and key timing in relation to the payment of those. And if we look at loan repayments, a lot of businesses have taken advantage of loan repayments. When I speak to business owners, the 4 key supports that have helped them most through these times has been the temporary wage subsidy scheme, now the ESS scheme, the ability to warehouse their revenue debt, the weights waiver, and also their ability to get capital moratoriums. Nearly 24% of all SME lending across pillar banks received payment breaks in 2020, to give you an extent of the support that was to businesses. Also, in relation to outflows, you just need to look at your monthly direct debits. I think this is sometimes a hidden cost for businesses, in that these just go out. Maybe examine these and see, do you need all those? Should you cancel them and maybe pay them monthly instead, and to help you manage this cost? It's very important that you make the hard decisions around costs now. Don't wait until cash flow is tighter or maybe cash reserves have run down a bit more. Look at your cost base and make the decisions now. If we move on to the next part of outflows, it's a review of your cost base. So in terms of fixed costs, maybe remote working is working well for your business. Maybe you don't need the office footprint that you have, and you can look at reducing your rent and rates bill as a result, maybe it's time to make that decision now. Also, if you reduce your physical footprint, you might have savings around your insurance. Maybe there's an opportunity to save on fleet costs. Variable costs, again, wages are probably the most significant element of variable costs. If your turnover has fallen by 20-25% in 2020, where's your wage costs gone? Even with the support of the TSS, you should be trying to match your wage costs in line with what you had in 2019, 2020 as a percentage of your overall turnover. Again, other costs that you should examine on a regular basis would be your light and heat and your phone bill. So if we just look at some cash flow management and moving on to the next slide in terms of the difference between 2020 and 2021. So this business is looking at its cash outflows in 2020 compared to what it's going to expect in 2021. So it availed of the TSS and the ESS extensively in 2020, but it's assuming that won't be available past March 2021. So there's going to be an increase in outflows, 25,000 in wage costs for this business. Also, it's going to have to start making current repayments to revenue. It availed of a full 6-month moratorium on its loans in 2020, not available in 2021. So its capital repayments to its bank are increasing in its outflows in 2021, and it's also going to have to make some payments to creditors and rates. So when we look at this example, this business has an additional outflow of 80,000 in 2021 compared to 2020. So again, if your business is going to incur increases in their inflows, how are you going to manage this, and have you the cash reserves to meet those going forward? So that brings us on to the supports that are available for business. I'm just going to give a summary on these, and really I'm going to focus on the inflows into your business. So if we look at the cash supports, and there is extensive supports available across numerous government departments. So if you look at revenue in terms of cash inflows, obviously the temporary wage subsidy scheme, the ESS now, is available to put cash into your business, as is the new COVID restriction support scheme, which came out in the budget. That's now open and available, and that will put cash into your business. So again, you should look closely at this, see if you're eligible, and apply straight away. Some businesses are waiting in relation to maybe letting their cash flow run down a bit, or their cash reserves run down a bit before applying. I'd say to businesses, in some cases, there's time limits on applying for these supports. So apply now, and I think build up your cash reserves to enable your business to trade through this challenging period rather than waiting. Just very briefly on loans, there is substantial loan support available through the SBCI, which is supporting loans from pillar banks and alternative funders to your business. And again, if you have appetite to borrow at the moment, there is longer term and lower cost supports available. The next slide will show the supports that are available from the County Council, the local authorities, and Microfinance Ireland. Again, a lot of businesses have availed of the Restart grant, which would cash into their business straight away. Also then, just to say that Enterprise Ireland and the local enterprise offices have substantial supports available across a number of different headings. And again, a lot of these will put cash into your business. So in relation to the supports that are available out there, and the next couple of slides just go through the Enterprise Ireland and the local enterprise office slide supports. Just be aware of what is suitable for your business. If these supports put cash into your business, get them, draw them down, and build up your cash reserves to help your business straight through this. So just moving on to section 5, which is just a recap on what I've gone through. Really, it's just to say, look, it's important that your business, Linda, if we can just move on to the recap there, please. It's like the next one, please. Yeah, thanks a lot. So look, it's very important that you understand where your business is now. I think the businesses that have the ability to look past the pandemic and have a strategy to help them be viable and strong in the next 3 to 5 years will probably do better than those that are just in crisis mode. We say this again, time and time again in business, cash is king. And I think this is very relevant in the current timeline and in the current crisis. Collect all your receivables, be very strict on your debtors, get your cash flow in on time. There is substantial help available, in particular in relation to cash inflow know what's available for your business, know what you qualify for, and apply. And don't be afraid to make the hard decisions now to have a viable business going forward. The next slide just shows some helpful websites that may be of use when you're looking at supports that are available for your business. Thank you.
Okay, Linda, if you want to put up mine, if you go into the first one, please. Next one. There we go. Thanks, Derek, and good afternoon to everybody. My first slide here takes a review of the underperforming challenge business spectrum, and it considers what actions can be undertaken by businesses in order to survive. I think at the outset, it's important to observe the arrow at the bottom of this slide. It outlines the changes in who the decision makers are the longer the process takes. And it moves further away from you in management and more involvement from stakeholders and creditors as the time progresses. So I suppose the best message I can get across today is to arm yourself with the current information, as Derek has said. And the earlier we get to make changes, the more influence and control we have in any process. Once we know the issues that we can control, we can then go about getting the best advice and from the most appropriate means of implementing possible changes to remedy any of these problems that we've identified. And if you can identify actions you can take in the short, medium, and long term from, as Derek has said there, and if you're prepared to take and accept and buy into these actions, and again, take the hard decisions, then, excuse me, by working closely together with your advisors and by constantly monitoring the changes or the actions you take on either a month-to-month, week-to-week, or sometimes even a day-to-day basis, you can arm yourself with a real prospect of survival. And I think now more than ever, you need advisors that you can turn to and trust for sound advice. And we're very lucky here in Waterford that we have an excellent range of advisors available to us. The recent insolvency statistics, which were published last month, show that the number of corporate insolvencies have only increased by 1.8% when compared, say, with the period for the same time last year. And I think that kind of reaffirms our position that the fallout from this pandemic has not yet been felt, but experience tells us that this will change. So in addition to the actions and the reviews that you can take, as Derek has outlined earlier, there'll be many occasions where the options and the solutions available will, as the graph shows, involve other stakeholders. And some of the larger SMEs, this solution may involve the necessity to, say, refinance or amend and extend your current facilities, or looking at mergers and acquisitions, or indeed entering into a formal insolvency process. And I think when negotiating with your lenders or the stakeholders, it's important for you as business owners to understand the consequence of being unable to achieve a deal on a possible restructure, say, being sought. And this is where you need to carry out your contingency planning, and that plays an important role in the process. I think that knowing what your plan B options are, or being able to demonstrate to a lender what a failure to achieve a successful refinance might mean, especially when a failure might lead to a formal insolvency process. I think in this climate with no current end in sight and the present pandemic, coupled with a possible no deal or hard Brexit looming on the horizon, any underlying value of a company entering into a formal insolvency process, regardless of what its asset base is, must surely worry those stakeholders. And you may well be able to use this as influence in your negotiations on your terms. And I think lenders need to be aware of the availability of the various insolvency processes, including, say, examinership, where the outcome to them might have more of an impact than a consensual refinance. And this would suggest that it should be easier to negotiate better terms with lenders, although I think for all of us, it's clear lenders don't seem to have got that message yet. Linda, if you can go to the next slide for me, please. Small and medium enterprises provide a valuable source of employment here in the economy, and the workforce in Ireland is estimated to be over 1 million. And they also form part of, say, our social fabric community, and we certainly need to do all we can to keep them in existence. And many of you are working really long hours, and we can understand that often you find it very difficult to sit back and take the time to examine the financial position or understand the difficulties that you may face. But in reality, real-time information is what you need to allow you to make early and important decisions to be made. And that's why I want to reaffirm again the importance of having that information. If you look at some of the simple things that to consider, together with what Derek has spoken about looking at your company's health, you know, are you using 100% of your overdraft facility all of the time? Has your credit terms been amended or refused by suppliers? Are you being sued for non-payment by suppliers? Derek mentioned the customers. Have you lost customers, or have you been unable to replace them? Have you got turnover issues with staffing? Are you coming under pressure from your lenders? Have they suggested maybe turning an overdraft facility into a term loan? Are you preparing your management accounts? And if so, what are they telling you? And then what are the trends in your particular sector? And where do you stand in relation to the trends, and what are they telling you? I think examining the answers to these questions will tell you whether your business is healthy, or if there are underlying issues that need to be addressed and which can be addressed by you. Then if we move on to the third slide, please. I think in this scenario, we've reached a position whereby, unfortunately, the only route out is to enter into some form of insolvency process. And firstly, we have a Part 9 scheme of arrangement. And this is a process, say, similar to an examinership, used by a company to reach a binding settlement with its creditors. And it has the advantage of potentially lower costs than the examinership, but unfortunately it has a much higher bar for creditor approval. And this is different from an informal scheme, which is also presently being used successfully, and which Valerie will touch on later. And I think this informal scheme as well may also prove to be a very popular tool for the SME sector in the future. But as Valerie will outline, there are pitfalls with it. However, go back to the Part 9 scheme. The company continues to trade and the directors stay in control. However, it doesn't preclude secured lenders from seeking to enforce on their security. And to date, really, this has only been used in complex restructuring cases. So it's important also to note that this isn't actually a formal insolvency process. The company doesn't need to be insolvent, nor does it need to be facing imminent insolvency before it can put forward such a scheme. And as indicated, the directors retain control throughout this process. So there's no insolvency practitioner. However, when you compare it with examinership legislation, there's no immediate statutory moratorium with regard to ongoing payments. And therefore, a company needs to be aware of its underlying liquidity throughout the process. The company draws up a scheme and the proposals are sent to creditors. And meetings of creditors are then held. However, it's then necessary to obtain 50% in number and 75% in value of every class of creditor to vote through the scheme. If it's successful, the matter is brought to court to approve the scheme and the debts are restructured. The middle option here is examinership. And this is a really effective option for companies struggling with excessive debt, but which have a solid underlying business. The process affords the company breathing space to find fresh investment and negotiate a compromise with creditors. And certainly, in our opinion, the number of examinerships is disappointingly low. The process itself can allow legacy debts to be compromised and right-size your balance sheet. And it allows for the repudiation of onerous contracts, including property lease agreements. The company makes an application to court, and this is accompanied by an independent expert's report. And this outlines how the company got into its present difficulties. And it also says that the company has a reasonable prospect for survival. It may be noted that it might also be necessary for the company to argue that its brand or its business is actually something to save. And as well as that, the company has to demonstrate that it has enough cash to discharge its outgoings through the period of the examinership. I suppose it's more and more common these days that examinerships, especially in larger cases, are essentially prepackaged. And most, if not all, of the negotiations have been concluded prior to entering into the process. Which ultimately, I suppose, makes the prospect of success all the greater. The ability to seek the appointment of an examiner in the circuit court has also allowed for smaller SMEs to consider utilising the tool. And we would suggest by far this is the best insolvency tool available to companies, regardless of their size. I suppose the only one drawback may be that the founders of the company or the directors have a possibility of losing control of the business to an outside investor. Then finally, we have liquidation. The last port of call for insolvent companies is to be placed into liquidation. And the liquidation process normally spends the end of the company. However, the appointment of the liquidator doesn't always mean a complete cessation to trade. There may be specific contracts that may be able to be novated, sold on, or licensed to the directors or third parties in circumstances where such actions would provide a greater return to the general body of creditors. So a liquidator can seek approval from a committee of inspection to complete such a transaction and say would agree a premium payment or a percentage of future profits, which otherwise wouldn't be achieved by the normal sale of assets. or where a contract might be determined or terminated as a result of the cessation to trade. So it is possible for directors and owners of companies to rise from the ashes of a liquidated company. And I think Valerie will comment upon that later. The advent of the Companies Act 2014 made significant changes to the liquidation process, and it makes involvement of creditors more important. And then, in addition, the government has also introduced recently the Companies Miscellaneous Provisions Act, or the COVID-19 Act 2020. This came into force in August 2020, and it introduced a number of additional temporary amendments to the Companies Act 2014. These are due to expire at the end of the year, but we suspect they will be extended by government order before the end of the year. And just two of the main points in relation to those are, one, it increases the length of an examinership period to 150 days if it's required. And in addition, it also increases the debt threshold from statutory demands for creditors to petition to wind up from 10,000 to 50,000. And this gives companies a little more headroom from those demands. So I suppose to finish my section, it's not all doom and gloom, but even in the best of times, companies need to and should rely upon trusted advisors. And as I said, we have a lot of excellent local advisors here in Waterford. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Valerie, who's going to provide us with some hands-on advice for you on avoiding legal pitfalls when facing decisions. Over to you, Valerie.
And thanks, Linda. I see you have my slides ready to go. I'm here to highlight really the legal considerations of business restructuring. So if you're in your business thinking about embarking on some changes as indicated by Andrew and Derek, what are the things that you need to worry about from a legal perspective? I suppose primarily for those of you that are directors of companies, or if you're a sole trader or in a partnership as the leaders in those organizations. We all know, I suppose, every business has been touched by the pandemic, and the different changes that have been hit or have come to hit us. It depends very much on the sector that you're in and the business that you are running and the supports that have been available to you. What we have seen from a legal perspective, from the very beginning, there was a huge plethora of employment law concerns, layoffs, some redundancies, all of that kind of thing. And that's still very much alive at the moment. And that's a big consideration still. And it will be as you go towards the next phase, if you need to make any hard decisions, as Derek alluded to earlier. We've had some developments on the landlord and tenant side, obviously with the reliefs that the government put in place there. And there are, a bit like the legacy debts that the guys were talking about earlier, there are arrears of rent arising in many businesses, and some businesses may be landlords themselves and for the tenants. So that's a big issue. And I think that it's one that's not going to go away, obviously needs to be addressed. And then on the financial restructuring side, where maybe there are lending considerations and securities that have come into place. We haven't really yet seen the creditors litigation that Andrew talked about earlier, but I imagine that that's something that will start to hit. We haven't seen people jumping to liquidation so far, but I would imagine that in the coming year, we're going to see more examinerships and liquidations, whether they're voluntary or not. If you could go on to the next slide, please, Linda. So I just want to really talk about solvency and what happens if that becomes an issue. It's in very simple terms, the legal definition of solvency is whether a company has the ability to pay the debts as they fall due. Now, there have been some moratoriums on some of those debts, so it's a bit looser than that at the moment, but it is quite a simple principle. And I suppose the best thing I can say is that you need to keep in touch with your accountants and your financial advisors so that your solvency situation can be assessed as things develop over the coming year. The next slide, please, Linda. So what do you need to do if insolvency is a concern? You need to look at your obligations and your options and try and forecast the consequences. And again, this is where your financial advisors will come into play. You must keep your creditors' interests at the top of the agenda. And this can be quite tricky because the creditors are there banging down the door, but you have a responsibility, and particularly as a director of a company, to be very aware of the implications of your insolvency or your potential insolvency on a creditor. Consider correct director's duties, your exposure and the consequences for you as a director, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. The key legislation, as Andrew has pointed out, it's the Companies Act 2014 and this new piece of legislation that was passed in 2020. And Andrew's given you some detail in relation to that. Just one or two other points that I'd like to comment on. There has been a relaxation of rules around execution of documents with less requirement for wet-in signatures on many documents, but they are still required for certain things like deeds and affidavits. And obviously, if you're involved in any kind of a restructuring where documents need to be signed, your solicitor will guide you through that. It also provides for general meetings to be held remotely, which is very important and was a nightmare actually at the beginning of the pandemic when we couldn't do that. So if you're facing into an insolvency, it may be that you need to hold an AGM or an EGM more likely. So you can look at the guidelines there for dealing with that. One important thing from a cash flow point of view is that there is now an allowance that you can withdraw or amend a resolution to pay a dividend. So that might take a little bit of pressure off if it's something that's advised by your accountant. And if you could move on to the next slide, I think Andrew has covered the other issues well. So if you're in survival mode, you're out of crisis mode and you're in survival mode, what are the legal things that you need to think about? As the guys have both said, engaging with your lenders, negotiating with your landlords regarding your lease agreements. It's probably a good idea. Those arrears, as I said, are not going to go away, but you might be able to come to some kind of an agreement to deal with them over a longer period or renegotiate the terms of your lease. Exploring a compromise agreement with your creditors. This is touching upon what Andrew was talking about. You heard about the formal scheme of arrangement that can be approved by the High Court, and that seems to be used in more complex cases. But for SMEs, I think entering into an informal compromise agreement with your creditors is not a bad idea if it takes the pressure off. It amends maybe the credit terms that normally apply if they're willing to give you a bit of leeway in that. The most important thing to do is to get it in writing, even if it's informal. You know, you don't have it to rely on as easily if you don't have it in writing. And then if you go further down the line and you end up perhaps under further scrutiny, if you have that documentation there, it would help. Obviously, remortgaging is a possibility, considering new commercial loans. And I think Derek touched on that as to whether you have the appetite to enter into further borrowings. And if so, well, what security can you offer as a company? Or will personal guarantees be asked for? Or indeed, are personal guarantees going to be called in if there's a difficulty there? And as directors, they're often asked for personal guarantees by banks. So it's just something to keep at the forefront of your mind. Next slide, please, Linda. I think Andrew has already covered the different formal procedures, so I'm not going to get into that. If we could scoot on, please, Linda. So really, an important issue legally is the director's behaviour and how are they coping with the difficulties that the company is facing, and what are the consequences for them if they're not dealing with them appropriately. And making the hard decisions, as Derek said earlier, is something that we don't like doing, but it is really, really important that you do, particularly as a director of a company, because you have those fiduciary duties under the Companies Acts, and if you don't, there will be consequences. So to just slip through that slide there, having regard for your creditors' interests and not taking steps to prefer one creditor over another unjustly. So if you have a connection, for example, to one creditor and you pay them before you pay the other in an unfair way, or if you were in a winding up situation and you cleared one debt before the other unfairly, will potentially attract criticism to your behaviour. Very important that directors don't pay themselves before they pay the other creditors. And it's one thing that's very tempting, but important that you don't do it. You must preserve the assets of the company to the best of your ability, not engage in reckless or fraudulent trading, and I'll talk about that in a minute. This is the hard one, and this is the hard decision I think that Derek is talking about. If insolvency is very real, you must put the company into voluntary liquidation as a director. And I suppose before you get to that point, as Andrew pointed out, there might be other options like examinership, which will give you a bit of breathing space before you have to do that. But you do have that very real obligation as set out in the Companies Acts to go into voluntary liquidation if that's what's necessary. You must ensure, obviously, your accounting records and your statutory accounts are up to date, and ensure that the proper procedures are held in relation to meetings and notices, etc. Next slide, please, Linda. So director's duties, what are your exposure if you're found in breach of director's duties? And one is if you're found guilty of fraudulent trading, that is a criminal offence, which could bring a term of imprisonment or a significant fine. But also is likely to, it will automatically bring personal liability to you without any limitation. So as companies are set up, we all feel that we have the protection of a company. It's a limited liability company that you can't be got at personally. If you're fraudulently trading, that veil is gone, that corporate veil disappears, and suddenly now you're in the firing line personally, and the creditors can come after you. Similarly, with reckless trading, while it doesn't bring a criminal liability, it does attract personal liability, as I've explained earlier. Next slide, please, Linda. So further exposures there, if you don't keep proper accounting records, there are liabilities, criminal liabilities there. And with procedural responsibilities and a breach of those, again, you can, I suppose, get more likely to get slaps on the wrists. But it's just important to know that that personal liability is potentially something that can come at you for any of these breaches. Next slide, please, Linda. Thank you. So the consequences then for directors who are not making the hard decisions, criminal liability and personal liability, as I've said earlier, but also you can be restricted from acting as a director. And what you need to be aware of is that if you end up in the liquidation space where a liquidator is appointed, all that control is gone from you as a director of the company. And the liquidator has a duty to the court, which is, I suppose, an indirect duty then to the creditors to report on the behavior of a director of a company. So if your behavior is found wanting, it will come to the attention of the court via the liquidator. And in order to defend that, you have to show that you are acting honestly and responsibly, which most directors are. But it brings me back to my point about if you're entering into informal schemes of arrangement, that you must have all the notes and the records, have the notes of the telephone calls, and have yourself covered on that to make sure that you can defend any allegations that are made against you about reckless trading. Next slide, please, Linda. It is also possible for a disqualification order to be made, and that is that you would be disqualified from acting as a director. And in circumstances where you might be winding up one company with an idea to start a new business, if a new opportunity arises, that's not a place you want to be in. And also it's not good on the CV. So we've all heard of the high profile cases where directors were disqualified from acting as a director, and it makes their future business dealings very difficult. The purpose of the disqualification orders and the restriction orders is to protect the public, not to punish you as a director. But you do need to know the reason for this is public policy, really, public policy interests. Next slide, please, Linda. So how do you minimize all of that exposure that I've talked about? As I said at the beginning, it's liaising, getting your financial advice, advisors, and obviously if you're moving further down the line, you may need your legal advice as well. Consider all of the options that are available to you. Talk to your creditors, consider refinancing if it's an option. Keep your books and accounts up to date. Take notes of calls and meetings, keep your emails, that kind of thing. And if it's inevitable, you have to make the hard decision. So as to ensure that you avoid reckless trading. Engage early, and to borrow the metaphor, avoid the ostrich and embrace the phoenix. So that's it. Thank you for listening. I hope that that's helped.
Thank you, Valerie, for that. And obviously to Andrew and to Derek as well. Thank you so much for that detailed and informative presentation. A couple of questions. If anybody does have questions, you're welcome to obviously put them into the Q&A box and we'll take a look at them from there. A couple have come in already that we might have a look at. Andy, we'll go to you first, if that's okay.
Sure.
So first question is for you. Why have there been so few examinerships when compared to the number of liquidations?
I think we go back to what Derek and myself had mentioned earlier, which really is needing to act early. Normally, by the time people even consider examinership, the insolvency has got to such a state that it's too late. That unfortunately, the head in the sand has gone too far. And I think we're all aware of people who have held out for too long. And by that time, there is no rescue option. There's no chance that anyone's going to give you any finance. And there's very little chance that the company has a prospect of survival. So I think it's as soon as you discover that you're entering into difficulties, and Derek has said, you know, what do your management accounts tell you? I think when you have that kind of difficulty, then is the time to start considering about whether examinership would be good for you, and seeking the advice of a good insolvency practitioner really is the key to that. So if anything, it's acting early, because if it's too late, liquidation, as Valerie has pointed out, once you're insolvent, you don't have a choice, because normally, unfortunately, if you're so insolvent, there's no way out of it, and hence the fact liquidations, I think, were 478 or something in the last year. So that's corporate insolvency, companies, creditors, voluntary liquidations, compared with less than, say, 150 or so, 100 examinerships. So that they are extremely low, and we would encourage any directors in difficulty to seek advice and to try and get it earlier.
Thank you, Andrew. Derek, a question has come in for you here. Which supports are social enterprises eligible for, do you know?
Okay, so I suppose the first thing is just in terms, social enterprise is very broad, but if it's a non-for-profit, if it's a company that's limited by guarantee, we've seen them avail of the temporary wage subsidy schemes. If that enterprise, I think, is also, if it's paying rates, is probably available for the restart. So it's really, I suppose, what the structure is on the social enterprise, and then there's the supports available. The second point I'd say is, whatever body, if you have a government body that you're liaising with, that body probably has supports. For example, the Board BIA have a set of supports, the local authority have a set of supports. So it's knowing those as well. But I think it comes back to the structure of the social enterprise and how it would work.
Thanks, Derek. Valerie, just one for you there. Rent, obviously, is always a big hot topic. If the company is in arrears of commercial rent, is the landlord treated the same as other creditors in a liquidation?
Yes, it should be, but I suppose the difficulty is that people feel the pressure maybe more from their landlord because they don't want maybe to be evicted. If closure is imminent and the landlord is in arrears of rent, I think that they are normally placed on the same level, unless they've got some kind of a security in place, which can sometimes happen with commercial leases, where perhaps, as I mentioned earlier, the personal guarantee of the directors of the company might be activated and called in, or if there was a large deposit, that deposit might be retained. So that's where they might end up with a bit of preferential treatment. Otherwise, yes, they are normally, I think, in priority, in the same level of priority.
Okay, and one of the points that you mentioned earlier was about not paying yourself before other people, obviously. But if the company director is also a creditor of the company, so are they allowed to pay him or herself before the creditors?
Okay, so sometimes what happens here is that a director of a company has given a loan to the company in order to maybe help it trade out with the cash flow situation. And they feel that they should be able to take their loan back because they've been acting as the bank of company, whatever, and they should be able to get that back before anybody else does. But the reality of it is, no, they are a creditor. Whether if they do, they may be guilty or they may be criticised and accused of fraudulent trading, which is probably a bit harsh, but certainly their behaviour will be brought into question, and the idea of a reckless trading, or there's other provisions in the Companies Act actually that specifically prevent this kind of behaviour. So the answer is, while it's tempting, if it's reckless, it is dangerous.
Okay, so get in line, in other words. Derek, if I could just ask you, and this is obviously an issue that comes up for everybody, because we're just all flat out. I mean, there's so many other different bits to life and work and business and running a business at the moment. But somebody just asked, how can I prepare projections when my trading keeps getting interrupted? So, I mean, are we, you know, we're potentially looking at an open, close kind of a situation until we get a vaccine. Very, very hard to predict. I mean, really crystal ball stuff.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, I could share a business owner's frustration because, and we saw that where people were at level 3, or even when they got to level 2 this year, trading for some businesses was quite good. Then they went to level 3, and before they knew it, they were in level 5 and they were redoing everything. I think if you're looking for supports with some, you know, if you're going to Enterprise Ireland or the local enterprise office or even your bank, you're going to have to come with a picture of where you think your business is going to be. So it is beneficial to take the time, even for your own knowledge. You know, you have to have a starting base for 2021. So you may decide, look, I'm going to factor in maybe a third of the year at a level 3 restriction, and I know what that looks like for my business. Maybe there's going to be another third of the year at level 5, and then hopefully if the vaccine comes in, I'll be back to normal. So at least then you know, make your assumptions. They may not be right, but at least it gives yourself a base. The big, I think, you know, for me, this is part of your job. You are going to be looking at your projections and your finances a lot more, and if you're not, you may regret that, particularly as Andy said, if you start going towards the solvency, decisions you could have made start coming out of your control. So it's all about early intervention here and planning. So do a set of projections. In a month's time, they may be irrelevant, but then unfortunately do another set and stay on top of it. But if you have a good template set up, you know, a half an hour a week could help you stay on top of it and give you the information to make good business decisions.
And just in relation, I suppose, looking into the crystal ball, and Derek, this is for you again, but I suppose just a question here. I was going to wait for a while until I see how my cash balances are until I apply for government supports. Is there a time limit on them? I'm assuming if somebody's handing you free money, you take hand and all.
Absolutely, and I think one of the conversations I'm having a lot with business owners is the cash balances aren't too bad, so they're kind of going, oh, I'll wait, right? But if something happens to your business and your cash balances start reducing rapidly, that's not the time to go looking for the money, because if you're delayed, then pressures come in. The money is available. All of these supports would appear to have timelines. So again, if you are eligible, all you have to do is hit the eligibility. Cash reserves aren't factoring into a lot of the eligibility. So yes, Linda, you're right. Take the free money. In some cases it's not free, but it's cash inflow, it's support. Take it, because really as a business owner, you're trying to navigate through this for the next 12, 18 months. Don't apologize for building up a war chest to get through it, and then you can resolve it after once you get through the other side.
Yeah, and I suppose it's important as well to keep an eye on them. I know we were obviously involved with business continuity vouchers through the local enterprise office. So many people missed out on them because they just weren't on the ball to apply, and there was a finite time. So I suppose be aware is the message. If there are new supports coming out, jump on them and go with it, really, isn't it?
Absolutely. And the COVID restriction, the CRSS as it's called, that came out as a result of the budget. It's now open. So again, if you're eligible, and that's really for businesses that are probably, you know, your turnover has to be down 80% based on this time last year, but it's a cash injection. So if you're closed, you know, go for it, get it. It's you know, 6 or 7 weeks cash injection into your business based on your turnover of 2019. So don't wait, because again, that'll be reviewed and changed. There's a limit on what the government can give. They're putting timelines on everything. Don't regret waiting, in my view.
Okay, thank you. Andy, we might just go one last question for you, if that's all right. What's the Revenue Commissioner's current stance on unpaid taxes in a liquidation?
Never like to speak on behalf of the Revenue Commissioners, but experience at the moment would be, obviously Revenue, since the pandemic has kicked in, have taken a very softly approach to revenue debt. However, I think the number of liquidations that have happened since the pandemic have been few and far between. But let's say at the moment, if you owe VAT, they take a dim view of it, because really what's happening is that you've been trading using their cash. However, I think the one thing that directors, if I was to give any advice here, would be you're better off owing VAT than you are PAYE PRSI, because PAYE PRSI is a fiduciary tax, and I have seen cases recently where Revenue have actually sought to recoup that money back personally from directors, because they as I said, being a fiduciary tax, it has to be paid. It's not your money. It is money that belongs to the employees, and they more or less see it as theft if that money isn't paid. So if you go bust owing 20 grand or 30 grand in PAYE PRSI, and you're a proprietary director, you can be sure that Revenue are going to take a look at your own personal circumstances and may well look to attach that debt to you. So I know it's not the right thing to say, but if you're going to go bust, go bust with owing VAT.
Okay, fair enough. The taxman will love you. Okay, well, look, I suppose on that note, thank you all for joining us. I suppose really, you know, it is tough. It is tough at the moment, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. Obviously, we want everybody to stay safe. We will get through this. And I suppose from a Waterford perspective, you know, there are good days ahead. I think it's important to be positive. Valerie, I assume you'd kind of echo that sentiment. Let's yes. You know.
I have to say, Linda, as lawyers, we're often, you know, and I'm always going to my upbringing. I was really encouraged. I think we've had a rough time in Waterford.
Your sound is gone on us there, Valerie. I'm not sure what's happening. Okay, so you're happy anyway. Well, that's amazing. As long as you're happy, we're all happy. Andy, same for you. Obviously, I think you'd be the same, and then we leave the last word to Derek on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Look,
sorry, Andy, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I'd reiterate what I said previously in the presentation. We've got lots of great advisors here in Waterford, and I think like they're there to be used, and I think any director in difficulty should go to their advisor and seek that advice, because you know the best advice is somebody else whose head is not stuck in that business that's experiencing difficulties, and you need somebody else who has the advice that can give that to you and let you make your decisions.
Perfect, thanks. And Derek, I'll let you close us out, but before we do, just again to thank the three of you for coming on board. We obviously have, we've recorded this session, so if anybody wants to watch it back, we'll have it up on social media and it will be available. A couple of thank yous obviously for coming in there as well from people who are joining us. And look, I suppose all we can say at this point is please stay safe, mind yourselves, follow the guidelines, follow the regulations, and hopefully we'll all have a great Christmas. And as I say, from a Waterford Chamber perspective, we're here at any time, so please don't be afraid to reach out. And Derek, I'll let you close us out then. Thanks.
Yeah, look, just to share that, Linda, I think, look, there's positives and good times ahead for the business community in Waterford. So my advice to business owners is don't be afraid to make the decisions now, even if they're the hard ones, to make sure you're on the pitch to benefit from what's coming for the economy over the next 5 to 10 years, particularly in Waterford. And thanks to everyone for joining. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.